Hello guys, and welcome to the Funny Documentary Channel. Before we drift into tonight's quiet exploration, I want to offer a soft invitation. If you enjoy these long, calming journeys into science and stillness, feel free to like this video and subscribe for more nights just like this one. And if you'd like, you can leave a comment sharing when and where you're listening from. Perhaps curled up in bed, traveling through the night, or winding down after a long day. It's always peaceful to know how far these stories travel. Tonight, we're settling into a topic that stretches softly across time itself. James Webb is changing where we think the universe actually starts. This is a story about beginnings that shift like distant horizons, about ancient light arriving with new messages, and about how the universe reveals itself not all at once, but in quiet, widening circles of understanding. It's a journey through deep space, but taken slowly, so slowly that your breathing can follow along without effort. So, whenever you're ready, let the room soften around you. Let your thoughts loosen their grip. And let's begin this gentle descent into the early universe, where time stretches thin and the cosmos begins again, quietly, just beyond the edge of sleep. Chapter 1. The Edge We Thought We Knew. The script opens with humanity's long-held idea of a cosmic beginning, a hazy edge where stars first appeared and time itself seemed to blur. This chapter lingers on how comfortable we became with that boundary and how science, much like a tired explorer, once agreed not to walk any farther. A quiet hint is introduced that this edge may have been optimistic. For most of our history, the universe had a habit of ending just a little beyond wherever we could see. Ancient sky watchers would tilt their heads back, trace familiar constellations, and imagine a tidy border just past the last visible star, a gentle curtain drawn across the cosmos. It wasn't a harsh boundary or a loud one. It didn't need to be. The night sky itself felt so complete that anything beyond it would have simply been excessive. In those early imaginations, the universe ended in the same way a quiet story does. Softly, with nothing demanding you ask what happens next. Even as our understanding grew, that instinct to place an edge somewhere lingered. Every new instrument extended our reach a little further, like a lantern carried deeper into a forest, scattering shadows, but never quite eliminating them. With each improvement, we discovered more stars, more galaxies, more distant shapes that seemed to recede politely as we approached. Yet the notion of a beginning, a single, distant threshold where things first turned from darkness to structure, remained reassuring. It was a kind of cosmic bookmark. This is where everything started. No need to check behind the page. For centuries, the universe felt patient enough to accept this simplification. Even when telescopes became bold enough to tease apart nebulous smudges and reveal them as galaxies, those galaxies seemed appropriately far away, as though they'd thoughtfully arranged themselves to match our expectations. They appeared young, where we assumed youth should be, and ancient, where we felt age belonged. Nothing contradicted the quiet picture of a universe unfolding in a steady, well-mannered sequence. By the 20th century, we had grown comfortable, perhaps a little too comfortable, with the idea that the universe had a definable start, a moment when light first broke free from the dense early haze. Scientists, cautious but imaginative, marked this moment with impressive mathematical expressions and diagrams so elegant they almost made the cosmos seem domesticated. The beginning was placed at a safe, dignified distance, far enough away to be mysterious, but close enough to feel intellectually manageable. It was here, at this horizon of comfort, that cosmology often paused. Not out of laziness, but out of a kind of respectful caution. Much like a wearied traveler who reaches a mountain ridge and decides the view is good enough for now, science occasionally settles on an explanation that fits cleanly into the available evidence. It promises to return later, after a short rest, maybe a snack, and perhaps a better pair of boots. Yet rest has a way of turning into acceptance, and acceptance into certainty. The boundary we imagined became a fixture. Countless diagrams and textbooks pointed to an early era called the cosmic dawn, a gentle poetic phrase that sounded like it should be whispered. It suggested a singular moment when the first stars flickered into existence, shy and tentative, illuminating the universe after a long and dignified sleep. For many years, that notion held steady. Students memorized it. Professors nodded approvingly at it. Even the universe, for the most part, didn't object. And then, without drama, without thunder, and certainly without consulting the committee, the boundary began to waver. It wavered not because of contradiction, but because the quiet space beyond it, once assumed empty, started to hint at depth. Like noticing that a distant horizon is not the end of the sea, but merely the place where sky and water pretend to meet, our understanding began to stretch. The more we refined our instruments, the more this comfortable edge looked less like a wall and more like a polite gesture from the cosmos. You may stop here if you like, but you don't have to. This chapter sits at that moment of initial doubt, when the universe gently suggested that our carefully placed beginning might have been drawn a little too close. Not wrong, just optimistic. In the same way, early maps placed sea serpents in blank regions not out of fear, but simply because they needed something to fill the space. It is an odd thing, realizing the universe may have started earlier, more gradually, and perhaps more independently than we expected. There's a small, almost affectionate embarrassment in it, as though we had underestimated someone who turned out to be quietly industrious all along. The cosmos, it seemed, had been busy long before our models gave it permission to be. One could imagine it shrugging slightly in the way of someone who has built an entire cottage garden before dawn and insists it was nothing, really. But here, in this early chapter, before telescopes sharpen and theories bend, we stay with that gentle uncertainty. We linger at the edge we thought we knew, the place where comfort and curiosity meet. It is a soft moment, unhurried, open-ended, and quietly suggestive. A moment when the universe leans a little closer, as though inviting us to take a few more steps into the dark, assuring us that the path continues long beyond the horizon we once believed was final. And somewhere, just beyond this familiar boundary, something waits. Not loudly, not urgently, but with the calm confidence of a truth that has been patient for billions of years. Chapter 2. A telescope that refused to look away. Here, the James Webb Space Telescope is introduced not as a machine, but as a patient observer with an unusual talent for noticing faint things others miss. The chapter explores how Webb doesn't rush, doesn't blink, and doesn't mind staring into darkness longer than feels polite, subtly implying that the universe rewards persistence. Far from the noise of Earth, past the comforting cradle of our atmosphere, rests a telescope designed not for speed or spectacle, but for stillness. the James Webb Space Telescope makes no attempt to dazzle with theatrical movements. It doesn't swivel dramatically or emit impressive bursts of light. Instead, it behaves like someone who prefers to arrive early, choose a quiet chair, and settle into the kind of silence that makes others instinctively whisper. Webb's presence in space is gentle, almost contemplative, as though it understands that the universe reveals its secrets only to those who have the patience to linger. In the cold, uninterrupted dark, Webb spends most of its days and nights, which are the same thing out there, simply looking, not glancing, not surveying, not gathering quick impressions, but looking in the old, deliberate sense of the word. It holds its gaze the way an artist studies a horizon or a librarian pauses over a beloved page. There is no rush in its observations, no impulse to move on quickly. This telescope does something unusual for a scientific instrument. It waits. Webb's design encourages this unrushed temperament. Its golden mirrors, arranged in a tranquil honeycomb pattern, gather faint traces of light that have thinned through unimaginable stretches of distance. Each mirror segment adjusts itself with movement so subtle they might make a snail seem impulsive. It is a machine, yes, but one that behaves with the quiet confidence of something that knows haste is unhelpful when studying a cosmos that measures its stories in billions of years. If older telescopes resembled explorers trudging bravely into the dark, Webb is more like a monk engaged in lifelong meditation. It does not wander. It does not fidget. Once it chooses a patch of sky, it commits with unwavering dedication, sometimes staring for hours, sometimes for days, gathering photons that left their sources long before Earth had oceans. The telescope's sensors are so sensitive that if a cosmic whisper existed, Webb would hear not only the sound, but the soft exhalation before it. In this way, Webb has become something of an expert in noticing what the universe does not announce loudly. It pays attention to dim structures that might escape busier observers. It notices the dusty outskirts of galaxies that once hid in shadow. It studies the shy glow of stars too embarrassed by their own youth to shine brightly. Where many instruments seek the dramatic or the obvious, Webb leans toward the understated, finding meaning in what is almost not there. This unusual patience has given the telescope a personality in the minds of scientists who work with it. They describe its images as having a quiet confidence, as though Webb is gently saying, "Look again, there's more." There is a kind of cosmic courtesy in the way it interacts with the universe, never forcing, never insisting, simply receiving whatever arrives with complete attention. If telescopes could practice mindfulness, Webb would be their serene teacher, reminding them that clarity emerges when one stops trying too hard to see. Webb's ability to hold a steady gaze is helped by where it lives, a stable perch called L2, a point in space where gravitational forces balance out in a way that allows the telescope to rest almost lazily relative to Earth. It is a quiet neighborhood, free from the atmospheric shimmer that blurs ground-based views and far from the technological chatter that surrounds our planet. Here, Webb floats in a kind of cosmic hush, turning its face toward regions of sky that have waited patiently for eons to be noticed. And notice them it does, not with the hurried snapshots of a traveler passing through, but with the careful attention of someone examining an old tapestry thread by thread. Each exposure is a long inhale, each image a slow exhale. Webb behaves as though the universe is a companion speaking softly, and all it asks is that we resist the temptation to interrupt. This temperament contrasts gently with the human tendency to rush toward answers, to gather data quickly, to declare discoveries in the brisk language of press releases. Webb's approach is almost humorous in comparison. It takes its time. It stares longer than seems reasonable. If telescopes held social gatherings, Webb would be the one silently focused on a single detail in a painting while everyone else discussed the weather. And inevitably, it would be Webb who discovered the small signature hidden along the frame. But this persistent gaze serves a deeper purpose. Many of the universe's earliest structures have faded almost to invisibility, stretched thin by distance and the expansion of space. To find them, one must cultivate a kind of cosmic endurance. Webb does this without complaint. It was built for it, shaped entirely around the idea that great distances require great patience. It gathers faint light the way a desert gathers dew, quietly, slowly, and with a respect for scarcity. There is something almost comforting in this realization that the most advanced telescope humanity has ever launched succeeds not through aggression or force, but through calm attention. In a universe often described as cold and indifferent, it is curious how much can be revealed simply by refusing to look away. The chapter settles here, with Webb floating in its quiet halo around the sun, staring deeply into places that have never been seen so clearly before. It does not blink. It does not hurry. It waits for the universe to speak, trusting that even the faintest glimmer holds a story worth hearing. Chapter 3. Infrared Light, or How the Universe Whispers. This chapter gently explains infrared light as a softer, slower form of seeing, less about sharp edges and more about warmth and memory. The narration compares Webb's vision to listening instead of looking, allowing ancient galaxies to speak in low, stretched-out tones that have been traveling far longer than anyone expected. There is a quiet kind of light in the universe, a light that rarely announces itself, that prefers not to shimmer or sparkle or draw attention with dazzling brightness. It exists in the spaces between starlight, in the warmth of distant dust, in the slow glow of things that are too patient to shine in haste. This is infrared light, the universe's most unassuming storyteller. It is the sort of light that would knock politely before entering a room, and even then might apologize for interrupting. Unlike the crisp beams of visible light that outline our familiar world, infrared carries something gentler: temperature, history, distance stretched into softness. If visible light sketches the universe in fine ink, infrared paints it in watercolors, allowing shapes to blend and quiet details to emerge in their own time. It does not rush to reveal itself. Instead, it lingers in the low, warm frequencies where the earliest chapters of cosmic history settled long ago. To understand infrared light is to understand a different way of sensing. It is less like opening one's eyes and more like placing a hand on an object to feel the memory of warmth it holds. Through infrared, the universe becomes not a picture, but a presence, one that hums, faint and extended, through vast distances. It is a form of seeing that approaches listening, where light behaves more like a tone than a color. This is the realm in which the James Webb Space Telescope is most comfortable. Where ordinary telescopes strain to capture faint visible glimmers, Webb listens to the deep, drawn-out wavelengths that have traveled farther than seems reasonable for any particle of light. Many of these photons began their journey when the cosmos had barely decided what shape it wanted to take. Along the way, the expanding universe gently stretched them, pulling their once bright wavelengths into the slow, warm quiet of infrared. Imagine a note played on a violin, sharp, vibrant, unmistakably defined. Now imagine that note stretched over billions of years, softened by distance, lowered in pitch, until it becomes a low, trembling hum. That hum is what infrared light from ancient galaxies becomes by the time it reaches us. And Webb, with its exquisitely sensitive instruments, is designed to hear that hum with remarkable clarity. Infrared light carries stories other wavelengths cannot. It slips through cosmic dust that blocks visible light, revealing structures that have long hidden behind curtains of darker material. It exposes stars in their earliest stages, still wrapped in the dense clouds that cradle them. It uncovers the skeletons of galaxies, where cooler regions outline the slow choreography of gas and dark matter. It shows us not only what is bright, but what is persistent. Perhaps most importantly, infrared light preserves the deep time of the universe. Much of the earliest starlight has been stretched so dramatically by cosmic expansion that it no longer falls within the spectrum human eyes can see. It is not lost. It has simply become quieter. The universe, it seems, keeps its oldest stories in the lower registers, as though speaking to us in a whisper, meant only for those willing to lean close. Webb's instruments were built specifically to lean close. Their detectors must remain colder than the deepest parts of interstellar space, chilled until they can distinguish faint warmth from nearly perfect cold. At such low temperatures, even a tiny photon becomes noticeable, like hearing the soft crunch of a leaf in an empty forest. The telescope senses not just brightness, but the subtle imprint of heat and energy that ancient structures still give off. In this way, Webb becomes not just a watcher of the cosmos, but a listener. Its mirrors gather long wavelength light as though cupping their hands to catch delicate murmurs drifting through space. The telescope is not seeking brilliance, it is seeking endurance. It is attuned to what has lasted across unimaginable distances, carrying the echo of creation in a form so fragile that a lesser observer might overlook it entirely. Infrared reveals a universe that is not sharp-edged or sterile, but textured and warm, filled with regions that glow faintly like embers in a fire that has been burning since time first allowed it. Through Webb's perspective, cosmic dust becomes luminous instead of obscuring. Cool stars step into view, no longer hidden behind their younger, brighter siblings. Galaxies that once appeared as hazy smudges emerge with depth and structure, as though someone gently increased the contrast on the universe's oldest photograph. There is a quiet humor in how infrared light behaves. It does not rush, but it does persist. It stretches and stretches, long past the wavelength where visible light would politely excuse itself and fade. Infrared remains, committed to the journey, determined to arrive even if billions of years have passed. If light could have a personality, infrared might be the friend who insists on walking the entire way instead of taking the shortcut, claiming that the scenery is worth it. Through this whispered form of illumination, the universe shares secrets it has no urgency to reveal. Webb simply listens, patient and attentive, allowing these long-traveled messages to unfold. And in this listening, something remarkable happens. the cosmos begins to sound less like an explosion frozen in time and more like a long, continuous murmur, gentle, ancient, and full of memory. Here, in the warmth of infrared perception, the universe does not shout its beginnings. It mentions them softly, in wavelengths stretched thin by distance and time, trusting that a telescope with enough stillness will hear what has always been there, waiting to be noticed. Chapter 4. When the beginning started moving. As Webb's first deep images arrive, scientists realize the early universe looks unexpectedly busy. This chapter explores the quiet surprise of finding fully formed galaxies where only cosmic infancy was expected, as if the universe had skipped a few pages while no one was watching. When the first deep images from the James Webb Space Telescope began to take shape, they did not arrive with fanfare. They appeared quietly on screens, line by line, like dawn spreading across a windowsill before anyone is awake enough to appreciate it. And yet, beneath that calm arrival was a subtle, collective intake of breath. Scientists stared at the early pictures not because they were confusing, but because they were full in a way the early universe was not supposed to be. According to long-standing models, the cosmos in its earliest epochs should have resembled a sparsely furnished room, a few faint lights here and there still finding their place, perhaps a handful of newly forming galaxies, small tentative structures learning how to hold themselves together. But what Webb revealed looked nothing like that tidy expectation. Instead, the deep field shimmered with a density of ancient objects, bright, confident, unmistakably structured, far too developed for their age. It was as though the universe had politely agreed to follow the established timeline, only to quietly proceed at its own pace when no one was watching. One could almost imagine the cosmos clearing its throat and saying, "I hope you don't mind, but I got started a little earlier." This was not chaos or contradiction. It was simply unexpected competence. The early universe, it appeared, had been remarkably efficient. Webb's images showed galaxies that had already grown large, already formed recognizable shapes, and already gathered enough mass to shine with a maturity better suited to later cosmic eras. They were not the cosmic infant scientists had prepared to meet. They were more like precocious children who had not only learned to walk, but were already organizing their toys by color and alphabetizing the bookshelf. Some galaxies displayed swirling forms reminiscent of much later spirals, their arms gracefully arcing through space. Others appeared compact and bright, packed with stars that seemed to have formed in surprisingly well-coordinated bursts. Instead of the expected cosmic clutter, loose gas, hesitant structures, half-finished arrangements, the telescope found a bustling neighborhood. It was the early universe, yes, but behaving with the confidence of someone who skipped the awkward phase entirely. This busyness posed an intriguing puzzle. Traditional theories had suggested that in these early moments, the cosmos should have been dominated by slow processes, atoms patiently gathering, gravity working with the gentle persistence of a gardener coaxing seedlings from reluctant soil. Instead, the images suggested that nature may have operated more like a highly motivated landscaper, arranging entire clusters in far less time than the guidebook recommended. The surprise did not stem from a single galaxy, but from swarms of them, each carrying the subtle implication that the universe had been active well before anyone had predicted. They varied widely in size and brightness, but many shared an unexpected trait. They were too luminous for their age. Their radiance suggested stars forming in vigorous numbers, far more rapidly than what early models had comfortably allowed. And with that luminosity came questions. Were stars forming sooner? Was matter gathering more efficiently? Had cosmic structures been assembling themselves quietly in the dark, long before our instruments could detect their handiwork? Each galaxy seemed to nudge the scientific community with a gentle suggestion. You may want to update your assumptions. There was no panic in these realizations, only a kind of intellectual amusement, the kind that arises when the universe once again demonstrates it is under no contractual obligation to match our expectations. In some research circles, the reaction resembled the bemused expression of someone who leaves a plant alone for a weekend and returns to find it has grown 3 feet, flowered, and perhaps filled out a tax form. But beyond the gentle humor lay a profound shift. The concept of a fixed beginning, a cleanly defined threshold where complexity first appeared, began to soften. The boundary that had once seemed so clear now showed signs of motion, not collapsing or disappearing, but stretching backward, drifting toward earlier and earlier moments. The cosmic dawn, instead of a single bright point, started to resemble a slow, extended brightening, a sunrise drawn out over an enormous span of time. Webb's deep fields did more than capture distant galaxies. They altered our sense of time itself. The early universe no longer appeared as a blank canvas waiting patiently for structure. It looked more like a workshop already in full swing, tools scattered, plans underway, and galaxies assembling themselves with quiet determination. What made this realization so striking was not the magnitude of the discovery, but the subtlety of its delivery. There were no loud signals, no cosmic announcements, just faint, ancient light arriving from objects that had been forming stars and shaping matter with an efficiency that defied earlier expectations. The beginning had not vanished. It had simply moved, slipping into earlier epochs, expanding its territory, revealing chapters of cosmic development we had not known to look for. In this shifting landscape, scientists found themselves adjusting their mental maps. The early universe was no longer a waiting room, but a construction site already bustling with activity. And as these new images spread across the scientific world, one quiet truth settled in. The cosmos has always been a far more industrious storyteller than we imagined. Here, at the threshold of discovery, the beginning keeps walking backward, gently inviting us to follow. Chapter 5. Ancient Galaxies with Remarkably Good Posture. Focusing on unexpectedly mature early galaxies, this chapter reflects on their structure, brightness, and surprising organization. There's a gentle, humorous undercurrent. These galaxies appear to have arrived early, well-dressed, and completely unconcerned with previous timelines. When the James Webb Space Telescope turned its patient gaze toward the earliest epochs of the cosmos, it did not expect to find galaxies standing there as though they had been waiting politely for introductions. And yet, that is precisely what the data revealed. Ancient systems arranged with a level of composure that should have taken far longer to achieve. These galaxies looked as though they had straightened their spines, smoothed their luminous attire, and presented themselves with quiet dignity, billions of years ahead of schedule. In the conventional storyline, early galaxies were supposed to be messy, ungainly collections of stars and gas, still learning how to hold themselves together, the cosmic equivalent of toddlers, charming but undeniably disorganized, dribbling starlight here and there, dropping clusters of gas in unpredictable places, wobbling under the influence of gravity that hadn't quite established a rhythm. But Webb's infrared portraits revealed a very different cast of characters. Galaxies with well-defined shapes, robust brightness, and a confidence that suggested they had skipped the whole awkward phase entirely. Some of these galaxies appeared astonishingly compact, as though they had condensed their matter into a tight, gleaming core, refusing to sprawl until they had their affairs in order. Others showed signs of intricate structure, subtle elongations and patterns hinting at internal motion, the kind that normally emerges much later in cosmic evolution. They weren't supposed to look this polished. They were supposed to be cosmic beginners, fumbling their way through the earliest steps of formation. Instead, they radiated a sense of readiness. Their starlight arrived with the intensity of systems that had been vigorously forming stars for quite some time. Their brightness suggested that stellar nurseries were operating at a brisk pace, producing new suns with admirable enthusiasm. It was as if these galaxies had been gently informed of the expected schedule and decided to improve upon it, treating cosmology like a flexible suggestion rather than a strict itinerary. To scientists, this unexpected maturity was both delightful and disorienting. The galaxies seemed almost smug about it, though, of course, galaxies are incapable of smugness. Still, there was an unmistakable charm in imagining them glancing at our models and shrugging in a way that implied, well, we started early, we're overachievers. Their structural integrity, their luminous cores, and the balance between stars and gas all hinted at processes running more quickly or efficiently than predicted. The sense of posture, of galaxies holding themselves upright, came from their symmetry. Many showed rounded or elongated forms that suggested internal gravitational discipline. Achieving such poise requires time. Stars must settle into orbits, gas must distribute itself with some semblance of order, and gravitational forces must negotiate a long-term agreement. Yet, here were galaxies achieving this composure in an era when they were expected to still be loitering in disorder, drifting in loosely bound clumps like students milling about before class begins. Brightness, too, played a role in their surprising presentation. These galaxies glowed with the intensity of systems that had been industriously forming stars. Perhaps, even in a near-continuous frenzy, a galaxy can only shine this boldly if it has built up a considerable population of stars. No small feat in the universe's early moments. And here they were, gleaming like lanterns set out early for a festival no one else had realized had begun. Some even displayed hints of rotation, an elegant motion that speaks of internal cohesion. Rotation requires time to establish. Matter must fall into place, settle, and move with collective purpose. Yet these ancient galaxies seem to have already embraced the idea, turning with the calm confidence of dancers who learned the choreography before the music started. Their movements, faintly suggested through patterns of light, hinted at a complexity that deepened the puzzle of their early maturity. This composure challenged assumptions about how quickly matter could gather and organize itself. Traditional models envisioned a gradual process, a slow, steady accumulation of gas flowing into proto-galactic structures, forming stars in sporadic bursts. Webb's findings hinted at something swifter, more streamlined. The early universe might have been a far more efficient architect than anticipated, shaping galaxies with the decisiveness of someone who refuses to procrastinate. There was also an unexpected grace to the way these galaxies held their place in the cosmic landscape. Rather than appearing scattered or haphazard, many aligned within delicate webs of matter, participating in patterns that suggested emerging large-scale organization. Their arrangement conveyed not chaos, but coordination, a quiet indication that the cosmic blueprint was already guiding structure into place. Observing this unexpected elegance evokes a gentle humor. One cannot help but imagine these galaxies as guests who show up to a gathering impeccably dressed only to realize they are hours early, standing in the doorway while the host is still sweeping the floor. And yet, they wait with composure, glowing softly, entirely unbothered by the discrepancy in timing. In their brightness, structure, and self-assured appearance, these early galaxies reveal a universe that was not merely forming, but flourishing. Their poise challenges our notions of cosmic adolescence, replacing the expected clumsiness with a quiet, radiant maturity. They invite us to reconsider what the early universe looked like, not a place of hesitation and disorder, but a realm where matter came together with remarkable confidence. Here, in these well-postured galaxies, lies the gentle reminder that the universe has always known how to assemble beauty swiftly, even when we imagined it would take its time. Chapter 6, Time, Stretched Thin, Like Old Light. This chapter drifts into the nature of cosmic time itself. Light becomes a traveler, slowly lengthened by the expanding universe. The narration rests on the idea that Webb is not seeing far away, but long ago, and that distance and history are quietly the same thing out here. In the deep reaches of the cosmos, time does not move with the firm steps we sense in daily life. It stretches, loosens, and settles into forms that feel almost fluid. To follow light across the universe is to discover that time is not a strict sequence, but a pliable thread, pulled longer and thinner by the silent motion of cosmic expansion. In this realm, moments do not vanish. They lengthen into echoes, carried by photons that refuse to relinquish their star even after billions of years. Light, in many ways, is the universe's most determined traveler. It begins its journey in the heart of a star or the glow of a galaxy, bursts outward with youthful vigor, and then, with admirable stubbornness, keeps going. Long after its birthplace has aged, changed, or disappeared entirely, the light continues, holding within it the memory of a moment that would otherwise be lost. The universe may stretch, but light stretches with it, as if reluctant to stop sharing what it once saw. This stretching is gentle, patient, and profoundly quiet. As space expands, light's wavelengths are pulled outward like threads of fabric loosened over time. A once brilliant short wave becomes elongated, softened, transformed into something more subdued. It is as though the universe, with each passing eon, invites the light to relax, to settle into a calmer tone. These stretched waves drift into the infrared, where the James Webb Space Telescope keeps its attentive watch. To observe such ancient light is to look not across distance, but across memory. Webb's golden mirrors are not capturing what the cosmos looks like now. They are receiving signals from eras that have long since receded into the deep past. In everyday experience, distance and time are separate ideas. One can be far away in space without being far away in years. But in the universe, these two concepts form a single melody. To see something distant is to see it as it was, not as it is. When Webb gazes toward the farthest corners of the observable cosmos, it becomes a kind of archivist, retrieving pages of history written in wavelengths too stretched for ordinary eyes to read. Each photon that reaches the telescope has survived an epic journey through expanding space, carrying with it the imprint of the moment it first escaped its source. Some of these photons began traveling when the universe was young enough to still be warming its hands from the fires of creation. This ancient light has a curious character. It does not hurry. It does not fade easily. Its journey is governed not by determination, but by inevitability, moving at a constant cosmic speed, unaffected by doubts or distractions. If light had emotions, it might feel mildly surprised to discover that its path has lengthened so dramatically, but it continues all the same, unfurling like a ribbon carried by a slow, steady breeze. As the universe expands, time itself becomes less a ticking sequence and more a landscape, broad, layered, and interconnected. We tend to imagine the cosmos as vast primarily because of distance, but in truth, it is vast because of age. The light that reaches us today began shining long ago, often before Earth had seas, before atoms in our bodies even existed, before space had developed many of the structures Webb now reveals. Through Webb's lens, the present moment becomes stitched to ancient epics. The telescope transforms what might be considered an ordinary act of observation into a journey backward along the arrow of time. It listens to the thinned-out whispers of photons that have lost their youthful brightness, but not their purpose. In doing so, Webb reminds us that looking outward is a form of temporal archaeology. This blend of time and distance creates an unusual perspective. A galaxy that appears tiny in Webb's images may not be small. It is simply far along the chronological tapestry of the cosmos, showing us the version of itself from a stage it has long since outgrown. What we call early galaxies are not early for themselves. They are only early for us, their ancient light arriving after an unimaginably delayed delivery. The expansion of space adds a gentle complication to this picture. The farther away an object is, the faster it recedes, stretching the wavelengths of its light even more dramatically. This process, known as redshift, transforms vibrant emissions into elongated signatures that slip gracefully into the infrared. It is this slow reddening of cosmic history that Webb is designed to pursue, not with urgency, but with the quiet enthusiasm of someone uncovering long-forgotten records in an attic. In this stretched light universe, nothing is quite where it appears. An object seen at a great distance occupies not the position we observe, but the one it held when its light began traveling. The true present of the cosmos is hidden from us, beyond the reach of even Webb's extraordinary gaze. What we see is a layered mural of ancient moments arranged by distance into a timeline that unfolds backward the deeper we look. Yet there is something soothing in this complexity. The idea that time softens into distance, that the past remains visible as long as light continues its journey, brings a calming continuity to the cosmos. The universe, in its vastness, does not discard its earlier scenes. It preserves them, stretched thin but intact, waiting for a telescope patient enough to listen. And so Webb listens. It captures light worn smooth by billions of years, light that has traveled farther than seems reasonable, light that transforms our understanding simply by arriving. In doing so, it reveals a universe where time is not lost, but elongated, drawn out gently like old light, sliding across the fabric of space. Chapter 7. The Universe. Before the universe felt ready. Here, the story turns toward theory and discomfort. Scientists had models. The universe, it seems, did not read them. This chapter calmly explores the growing realization that star formation may have begun earlier, faster, and with more confidence than anyone politely expected. In the quiet halls of cosmology, there has long been a comforting understanding about the early universe. After the first great expansion, it was thought that the cosmos would take its time before attempting anything ambitious. Gravity needed a moment to gather itself. Gas needed to cool, coalesce, and slowly drift into shapes that might one day ignite. According to the models, star formation was supposed to be a leisurely process, something the universe would ease into only after the chaos of its birth had settled into something resembling calm. Scientists imagined this early era as a kind of cosmic waiting room, hydrogen and helium, the universe's first simple ingredients, would drift through expanding space like unhurried travelers. Gravity would gently coax them together, gradually forming denser clumps. Only after long stretches of time would the first stars spark to life, flickering into existence in modest numbers. It was a tidy picture, full of patience and predictability. And then the James Webb Space Telescope arrived, bringing with it a soft, steady reminder that the universe is under no obligation to follow our expectations. When Webb peered into the deep past, the starlight it captured suggested that the cosmos had not merely begun forming stars earlier than assumed, it had done so with an enthusiasm that bordered on bold. What Webb uncovered implied that the universe had started setting the stage for complexity with surprising swiftness. Instead of a long stretch of cosmic idleness, the data hinted at an early era humming with starbirth. Clouds of primordial gas were gathering themselves efficiently, collapsing under gravity's pull, not in slow motion, but with something approaching decisiveness. The first stars, far from hesitant, appeared to ignite with a kind of confident immediacy, as though the universe had woken up from its explosive beginning and promptly set to work. This was not the chaotic star formation expected of youth. It was structured, prolific, and startlingly early. Entire pockets of the cosmos seemed to glow with starlight from populations that should have taken far longer to assemble. Instead of vast stretches of quiet darkness, the early universe revealed itself as a place alive with activity, quiet from our vantage point perhaps, but industrious in its own time. In scientific circles, this discovery provoked the gentlest form of discomfort, the kind that arises when a long-held assumption tilts slightly out of alignment. It wasn't the sort of upheaval that sparks alarm, but more like realizing that a familiar map has mislabeled a few roads. The landscape remains the same, but the paths through it require careful reconsideration. One of the most striking realizations was that the earliest stars may have formed not merely earlier, but faster than the models predicted. The first generations of stars, massive, short-lived, and intensely luminous, appear to have ignited in numbers that suggest the primordial gas was much more cooperative than expected. These early stars, sometimes referred to in theory but rarely glimpsed directly, were thought to be shy and sparse. Webb's observations suggested otherwise. The early cosmos may have been lit by stellar furnaces burning with impressive vigor. Theories designed to chart the timing of cosmic evolution began to show their seams. Models calibrated to slower star formation suddenly appeared too gentle, too cautious. The universe, in its remarkable indifference to theoretical schedules, had simply begun forging light wherever conditions allowed, and those conditions may have been favorable far sooner than assumed. The cosmos didn't wait. It acted. A quiet humor emerged in discussions around these findings. Some researchers described the early universe as ambitious, as though it had woken on its first cosmic morning and decided that forming stars was an excellent way to start the day. Others likened it to a child assembling complex structures long before anyone thought to introduce instruction manuals. It wasn't chaos. It was competence, unexpected, efficient competence. What this means for cosmology is subtle but significant. If stars were forming rapidly in the early universe, then many of the processes thought to require long spans of time must be re-examined. The cooling of gas, the collapse of early clouds, the organization of matter into star-forming regions, all may have occurred under conditions far more conducive to quick assembly than previously appreciated. The cosmic recipe, as it were, may have allowed for faster cooking. Yet, even as theories adjust, the universe remains calm, unbothered by the discrepancy. It has always known its own timing. It is only we who are catching up, reshaping our understanding with each faint signal Webb returns. The discomfort this creates is gentle, softened by curiosity. It is the kind of discomfort that expands into wonder, a reminder that the cosmos is not a story written for our convenience, but a reality that occasionally lends us glimpses of its true complexity. In contemplating this unexpected early activity, one senses the universe as a place that has always moved at its own pace, not hurried, but purposeful, not chaotic, but quietly decisive. The stars that formed before the universe felt ready illuminate a truth older than any model. Readiness is a human concept, not a cosmic requirement. Here, in this soft redirection of expectation, scientists find themselves listening again, more closely, more cautiously, to the earliest starlight. And the universe, patient as ever, continues unfolding its history, one quiet revelation at a time. Chapter 8, Darkness That Was Never Empty. Rather than treating the early universe as blank or silent, this chapter reframes darkness as active, textured, and quietly productive. Gas clouds gather. Gravity practices patience. The universe is introduced as something that was busy long before it was visible. There is a familiar temptation to imagine the early universe as a void, an immense black expanse so empty that even silence would have sounded loud in comparison. It is an image shaped by the absence of starlight, by the lack of visible markers to reassure us that something, anything, was happening out there. But the darkness of the young cosmos was not a vacant sort of nothingness. It was a place of hidden motion, quiet assembly, and subtle transformation. It was darkness with a pulse. Before the first stars ignited and poured light into space, the universe existed in a state of gentle preparation. Clouds of hydrogen and helium drifted through expanding space, not yet luminous, but far from inert. They moved with the slow grace of dancers practicing steps long before the music begins. Though invisible to human eyes, these clouds carried the seeds of future brilliance, gathering under the faint but persistent pull of gravity. Gravity itself was the patient architect of this unseen era. It worked softly, tugging here, nudging there, persuading stray atoms to draw closer. Unlike light, gravity never rushes. It prefers steady, continuous influence, shaping the cosmos with the same calm certainty that rivers use to carve canyons. In the absence of starlight, gravity became the principal sculptor of the early universe, setting matter into delicate patterns that would one day support galaxies, clusters, and grand cosmic structures. The darkness of this era had texture, subtle fluctuations in density that would eventually snowball into more complex forms. These variations, often described as ripples impressed into the fabric of space, guided matter into certain regions more readily than others. Even without illumination, the early universe possessed contours, gradients, and a kind of quiet momentum. Nothing about it was static. As these gas clouds gathered, their interiors began to change. Atoms moved closer, collisions increased, and pockets of denser material formed almost imperceptibly. No sparks flew, no light flashed, but deep within this unseen landscape, conditions were slowly aligning for the first true bursts of cosmic luminosity. It was a long anticipatory inhale before the universe's first exhale of light. Despite the darkness, the young cosmos was not silent either. On a microscopic scale, particles interacted with constant energy, exchanging momentum, generating faint thermal murmurs that would be imperceptible to any distant observer. This activity did not resemble the vibrant glow of stars or the swirling brilliance of galaxies, but it was activity nonetheless, persistent and meaningful. One might compare this period to the backstage of a grand performance. Curtains drawn, audience waiting, a hum of preparation filling the space behind the scenes. Props are arranged, performers find their places, and stage hands adjust the smallest details. When the curtain finally rises, the audience sees only the finished arrangement, never the long, quiet labor that made it possible. The early universe was that backstage, dim, industrious, completely essential. Scientists sometimes call this epoch the cosmic dark ages, a phrase that conveys the absence of light but fails to capture the richness of the activity unfolding in the shadows. Webb's observations, along with other theoretical insights, have encouraged a reconsideration of this period. Instead of imagining it as a vast, featureless void, we can begin to see it as a laboratory for the laws of physics, a place where matter gathered courage, gravity rehearsed its choreography, and the stage for future stars was meticulously set. Even the darkness itself played a role. In deep cosmic shadows, gas could cool more effectively, losing energy and collapsing into denser formations. Without starlight heating the surrounding regions, clouds could settle and contract with fewer distractions. In this sense, darkness was not merely the absence of illumination. It was an ingredient, providing the conditions necessary for the first luminous structures to take shape. It is almost humorous to imagine the universe bustling quietly long before anyone or anything was around to appreciate it. Matter gathered itself together with the kind of earnest determination, arranging patterns that would one day host galaxies, planets, and all the complexities that followed. If the early universe had possessed self-awareness, it might have felt slightly indignant at being called empty, much like a busy workshop mistaken for an abandoned warehouse simply because the lights were off. The patience of this era is striking. Processes that would later unfold in dramatic displays of radiation and energy began here in forms too subtle for any ordinary detection. Webb's infrared sensitivity allows us to glimpse the after effects of these early preparations, but the true activity of the primordial darkness remains a realm of quiet significance. It reminds us that not everything meaningful announces itself with brightness. By reframing this early epoch, we begin to recognize that the universe was never idle. It was busy at a pace appropriate to its youth, arranging itself on scales far too grand for hurried processes. Darkness did not hinder its progress. It sheltered it, allowing matter to gather in peace. And so the darkness before the first stars becomes not an absence, but a foundation, a vast, intricate prelude to the universe we now see. A reminder that even when nothing seems to be happening, the cosmos may be preparing its most luminous moments just out of sight. Chapter 9. Rewriting without erasing. This chapter reflects on how scientific understanding evolves. Older telescopes weren't wrong. They were simply listening to a quieter universe with less sensitive ears. Webb doesn't overthrow the past. It gently extends it, like adding another verse to a very long song. Scientific understanding rarely changes with dramatic upheaval. It shifts more like the tide, slowly, steadily, rising without erasing the shoreline it touches. When the James Webb Space Telescope began sending back its delicately detailed portraits of the distant cosmos, the effect was not that of a revolution overthrowing established knowledge. Instead, it felt like the soft expansion of a familiar melody, the introduction of new harmonies to a song that had been playing for centuries. Before Webb, humanity's vision of the universe was shaped by observatories that worked with remarkable ingenuity, each one pushing the boundary of what was visible. These telescopes were not wrong. They were pioneers operating with the tools available to them. Their discoveries built the foundation of modern cosmology, charting the large-scale structure of space, identifying galaxies at extreme distances, and gradually revealing how cosmic history unfolded. They were like early musicians who captured the main theme of a symphony but could not yet hear its finer notes. The limitations of earlier instruments were not failures, but conditions, constraints imposed by technology, atmosphere, and wavelength. They observed a universe that appeared quieter, more distant, and less detailed simply because faint signals had not yet reached the threshold of detection. The cosmos is generous with its light, but not always eager to give up its secrets. Many of its most delicate hints reside in wavelengths so subtle that only a telescope built with extraordinary sensitivity could perceive them. Webb's arrival did not correct the work of its predecessors. Rather, it illuminated regions they had brushed with broad strokes. If earlier telescopes painted the cosmos with confident outlines, Webb supplies the shading, the intricate textures that deepen the image without contradicting it. Each new observation extends the narrative, adding nuance to a story that was never finished. This is the natural rhythm of science. Theories are built not as monuments, but as scaffolding, structures meant to be expanded as new information arrives. When Webb reveals galaxies that appear earlier or brighter than expected, it does not topple the established framework. It simply encourages an adjustment of the beams, an expansion of the architecture. The structure grows taller, but the foundation remains intact. One might imagine the scientific community gathered around Webb's images as readers encountering a newly discovered chapter of a familiar book. The earlier chapters are not invalidated, they are enriched. The plot becomes more intricate, the characters more surprising. No one blames the author for withholding details. They simply had not been written into the editions available before. This gentle extension of knowledge brings with it a quiet humility. Scientists are reminded that the universe is under no obligation to lie within the limits of past instrumentation. It behaves independently of what we can see, hear, or measure. Our understanding expands only when our tools do. Each new telescope becomes a fresh pair of ears, attuned to frequencies previously missed. Where older observatories heard a faint hum, Webb discerns subtle harmonies layered within, revealing complexity that had been present all along. Rather than rewriting cosmic history, Webb is clarifying it. It is as though someone turned up the dimmer switch in a vast room. Objects that were once shadowy grow distinct, and contours that were assumed become refined. Nothing is erased. Everything becomes more vivid. This perspective brings comfort to those who dedicate their lives to science. It means their earlier work remains meaningful, even when refined by new discoveries. The universe was not misleading them. It was simply speaking in tones too quiet for their instruments. Now, with better ears pressed gently against the fabric of space, scientists can hear notes that had been shimmering softly in the background. There is also a quiet humor in how the universe behaves toward our instruments. Older telescopes, valiant in their own right, were like listeners who caught only the melody of a song and did not realize there were harmonizing voices in the distance. Webb, with its heightened sensitivity, leans in and hears the full ensemble, a cosmic choir performing on wavelengths stretched across billions of years. The song was always there. We simply needed to tune ourselves more finely to hear it. This process of extending knowledge rather than replacing it mirrors how growth often works in human experience. We rarely discard our earlier understandings. We build upon them, refining our sense of the world as new information arrives. The universe invites us into this same unfolding, encouraging curiosity without condemning past interpretations. Webb's contributions, therefore, are not corrections, but continuations. Each faint galaxy it reveals, each stretched ray of ancient light, each unexpectedly mature structure. These are verses added to a cosmic song still far from finished. The melody deepens, the rhythm subtly shifts, and new patterns emerge, all while the original themes remain recognizable. In this way, science becomes an ongoing collaboration across generations, with each era adding its own observations to the tapestry. Webb's chapter is particularly luminous, but it does not dim the chapters that came before. Instead, it gently lengthens the scroll of cosmic understanding, reminding us that discovery is less about rewriting the past and more about seeing it illuminated from new angles. And so the universe grows not by contradiction, but by extension, always there, waiting to be understood with ever finer perception, always ready to reveal its next quiet verse. Chapter 10. The calm confidence of cosmic structures. Here, the narration slows further, focusing on the large-scale structure of the universe, filaments, clusters, and vast arrangements that appear earlier than expected. There's a quiet amusement in how quickly the universe organized itself, as though it had places to be. The universe, when viewed on its grandest scales, reveals a quiet architecture that feels almost deliberate. Stretching across billions of light years are patterns so vast and intricate that they seem to belong to a realm beyond ordinary imagination. Sweeping filaments of matter, dense knots where galaxy clusters gather, and enormous voids where space breathes in long, uninterrupted silences. These structures form a cosmic web, delicate yet immense, woven from threads of gravity and time. For a long while, scientists believed such large-scale arrangements should have taken ages to appear, slowly sculpted as galaxies tugged on one another over vast epochs. The early universe, by this logic, ought to have been comparatively simple. Structures of such magnitude require time to coordinate themselves, much like a city growing from scattered houses into an organized landscape. But as Webb's observations nudged deeper into the past, hints emerged that this cosmic order was arriving sooner than anticipated. Instead of discovering a universe still fumbling through early construction, Webb encountered sweeping arrangements that suggested remarkable efficiency. Filaments were already stretching across space, forming the first outlines of the cosmic web. Clusters gathered matter with the confidence of seasoned organizers. Even the earliest detectable structures showed signs of alignment, as though gravity had whispered instructions and everything had agreed to cooperate far earlier than expected. This rapid organization carries a subtle humor, a cosmic wink. The universe seemed to have assembled its grand layout with the kind of brisk competence typically reserved for someone preparing a guest room only moments before visitors arrive. Somehow, managing to make everything look effortless and intentional. If galaxies had personalities, they might nod politely at each other across these filaments, acknowledging their roles within a structure far larger than themselves. The formation of these immense patterns begins with something astonishingly simple: tiny differences in density, left from the early cosmos. These variations, too subtle for any eye to see, served as the seeds for cosmic arrangement. Gravity, with its unfailing patience, gently tugged matter toward the slightly denser regions, strengthening their pull over time. What began as whisper-soft unevenness grew into prominent structures, filaments stretching across unimaginable distances, clusters forming at intersections like luminous crossroads. In the darkness of the early universe, these structures were not illuminated yet. They existed as patterns of matter distribution, quiet outlines waiting for stars to ignite and reveal their forms. Webb's sensitivity to faint, ancient light provides a window into these beginnings, capturing the soft glow of early galaxies aligning themselves along these invisible cosmic threads. It is intriguing to consider the calm decisiveness with which these structures emerged. There is no rush in their formation, yet neither is there hesitation. Gravity does not dawdle. It simply moves at its own steady pace, and everything else follows. The universe organizes itself not through forceful command, but through the gentle, persistent pull that shapes all things. In this way, cosmic structures grow like trees responding to sunlight. Slow, graceful, inevitable. Clusters of galaxies present an especially captivating picture. These vast gatherings represent some of the largest bound formations in existence. They consist of hundreds or thousands of galaxies woven together by gravity, sharing not only space but a mutual destiny. Within them, galaxies orbit a center of mass, dancing in patterns shaped by the invisible presence of dark matter. Even in their early stages, clusters exhibit a sense of communal identity, as though the universe decided early on that cooperation would be an efficient strategy. What remains most surprising is not merely that these structures exist, but that they appear so soon after the universe began. It challenges intuition to imagine such vast arrangements settling into place while cosmic expansion was still racing forward with youthful energy. Yet, there they are, calm, connected, confident in their form. This early coordination does not suggest haste, however. Rather, it speaks to the deep coherence of the universe's underlying laws. The same gravity that gathers dust into stars and stars into galaxies also stretches its influence across unimaginable expanses, guiding the formation of the cosmic web. Webb's observations allow us to witness this framework at earlier stages, revealing that the blueprint was already well underway long before starlight illuminated it. In these quiet glimpses, the universe feels less chaotic and more composed. Its largest structures seem to understand their purpose early on, aligning along invisible lines of influence like constellations drawn before the stars have fully appeared. There is something soothing about this natural order, something comforting in knowing that vast, elegant patterns were forming long before any galaxy knew how bright it could shine. As we take in Webb's portraits of ancient filaments and early clusters, we encounter a universe that was never as disorganized as we once assumed. Instead of floundering in primordial confusion, it arranged itself with a kind of effortless efficiency, as though responding to a silent rhythm, one woven into the fabric of space from the beginning. And so, the cosmic web emerges not as a late achievement, but as an early gesture, a quiet declaration of structure in a universe only beginning to find its voice. Chapter 11, where first becomes a soft word. This chapter questions the idea of a single beginning. Instead of one moment, the universe reveals a gradual unfolding, layers of firsts overlapping gently. The narration invites listeners to rest in the idea that beginnings can be slow, distributed, and unannounced. First is a word we often imagine with clear boundaries. A first step, a first sunrise, a first spark. Moments that stand alone, definitive, and easily circled on a diagram. For a long time, the beginning of the universe was framed in a similar way. One moment when darkness lifted and structure bloomed, the singular point where the cosmic story truly began. But as Webb's deep observations stretch our view ever farther into the past, the notion of a single, crisp beginning becomes softer, more like a dawn that brightens gradually rather than a switch suddenly flipped. When we look back across cosmic history, it becomes increasingly difficult to pinpoint where one chapter ends and another begins. The universe did not erupt into complexity all at once. Instead, it unfolded in overlapping layers, each contributing something new while still carrying the quiet momentum of what came before. It was not a tidy ladder of events, but a slow, intertwined blossoming, one that resists any attempt to label a specific moment as definitively first. Consider the emergence of the earliest structures. They did not appear in unison, announcing themselves in a chorus. Instead, scattered regions began changing at slightly different times, like lanterns being lit unevenly across a vast plain. One area cooled enough for gas to coalesce. Another collapsed under gravity's encouragement. Somewhere else, a brightening hint of radiation signaled a star beginning to form. These events were separate but simultaneous, early, but not earliest. Each carried a legitimate claim to being a beginning, depending on where one draws the boundary around significance. This gentle ambiguity becomes clearer through Webb's discoveries. As it detects signs of increasingly ancient galaxies and surprisingly organized structures, the idea of a singular start to cosmic formation becomes less convincing. Instead, the early universe looks more like a tapestry being woven from many directions at once. Threads tightening here, looping there, interlacing without a single point of origin that can be cleanly isolated. Even the birth of light itself was not a sudden unveiling. Long before luminous objects appeared, the universe passed through stages that each might be considered a beginning in their own right. There was the formation of the first atoms, when the fog of charged particles settled. There was the moment when photons could finally travel freely, carrying with them the first visible imprint of cosmic conditions. Earlier, still were the tiny fluctuations imprinted from processes that predate any structure we can now see. Each of these milestones was crucial, and each could be labeled first, with reasonable justification. Yet none of them possess the decisive clarity we often associate with a beginning. They are more like faint waves approaching shore, arriving not all at once, but in a gentle succession, each blending into the next. The universe became itself gradually, in a long exhale that carried the rhythm of inevitability rather than the punctuation of sudden change. This softer understanding of beginnings invites us to rethink our relationship with cosmic history. We often crave neat timelines, orderly sequences that provide a sense of completion. But nature seems to prefer transitions that are fluid, overlapping, and reluctant to obey discrete boundaries. First in the universe is not a moment, but a region, an era where many things began at once, each at its own pace, each adding its own thread to the growing pattern. There is a quiet comfort in this. It suggests that creation does not require precision or spectacle. It can emerge slowly, modestly, without announcing itself. The earliest galaxies did not unfurl banners to proclaim their arrival. The first stars did not trumpet their ignition. Everything unfolded in an unhurried way, allowing complexity to arise organically from the conditions at hand. Beginnings, it turns out, can be shy. Webb's observations echo this truth. The deeper it looks, the more it reveals beginnings hiding within beginnings. A galaxy that appears to be the earliest of its kind is soon joined by another even farther away, and then another. Each new record quietly yields its title as soon as a fainter, more distant object emerges from the dark. It becomes clear that the universe did not wait for a singular moment of transformation. It has been beginning continuously in layers too subtle to fit into a simple narrative. Even the language we use to describe cosmic evolution shifts gently under this realization. Instead of searching for the first galaxy, we begin speaking of early populations, early clusters, early life. Instead of seeking a single turning point, we acknowledge a region of time where many thresholds were crossed gradually. What was once imagined as a door swinging open becomes a long hallway, illuminated one lantern at a time. There is a quiet lesson here, wrapped in starlight stretched thin by distance. The universe is not made of singular beginnings, but of continuous emergence. Growth does not always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it settles in gently, like dawn spreading across a landscape that was never truly dark, only waiting. And so the word first becomes soft, a suggestion rather than a decree, a reminder that the earliest moments of the cosmos were not solitary or abrupt. They were layered, patient, and profoundly interconnected. In this vast unfolding, beginnings do not stand alone. They blend, overlap, and support one another, forming a tapestry of origins that stretches far beyond the reach of any single moment. Chapter 12. The Telescope as a Listener, Not a Judge. Returning briefly to Webb itself, this chapter treats the telescope as a neutral presence, recording without opinion, collecting light without interpretation, meaning it suggests is something humans add later, often while lying awake at night, staring at ceilings. In a universe filled with motion, noise, and luminous expression, the James Webb Space Telescope occupies a role of remarkable quiet. It does not argue with the cosmos or question what it finds. It does not attempt to confirm theories or challenge assumptions. It simply listens, calmly, impartially, the way a stone in a river listens to the water flowing around it. If Webb could speak, it would do so in the soft tones of someone who prefers to observe rather than participate, offering information without ever imposing meaning. The telescope's quietness is not merely a poetic notion. It is intrinsic to its purpose. In the dark beyond the moon, Webb holds its position with unwavering steadiness, its mirrors arranged with near monastic symmetry. Each component is designed to do as little as possible besides receive. No flourish, no embellishment, no commentary. Its instruments are tuned to allow ancient light to arrive exactly as it is, bearing memories of distant eras without a single note altered or emphasized. This neutrality sets Webb apart from the human minds that interpret its findings. While the telescope collects photons, tiny messengers that have traveled across expanding space, scientists convert those photons into stories, theories, models, and revised diagrams. Humans cannot help but search for meaning. It is one of our species' oldest impulses. But Webb itself has no such inclination. In its mechanical heart, light is simply light, a pattern to be detected rather than a narrative to be decoded. There is something calming about this non-judgmental presence. Unlike the planet-bound observers whose eyes often grow tired, whose thoughts drift toward interpretation, Webb remains unbothered by the complexity of what it sees. It neither marvels nor doubts. It neither approves nor corrects. It simply accepts the universe as it arrives, one photon at a time, without bias or expectation. In this sense, Webb behaves much like a trusted listener, the kind one might confide in during a sleepless night. The telescope's stillness mirrors the quiet moments when someone lies awake, gazing at a ceiling in the small hours of the morning, letting thoughts drift unhurried across the mind. Just as those moments allow reflections to surface without judgment, Webb allows cosmic information to gather without interference. It is not concerned with what the data means. It only ensures the data is received faithfully. This impartial listening is essential, for the universe often speaks in subtle ways. Faint smudges of light hint at galaxies half-formed. Gentle temperature shifts reveal hidden structures. Slight distortions trace the fingerprints of unseen forces. Had Webb arrived with preconceived notions, it might have overlooked what did not fit. But it does not overlook. It simply observes. The responsibility of noticing and of understanding falls entirely to us. There is a curious elegance in this arrangement. The telescope occupies a space of pure reception, while interpretation unfolds miles below, in offices, laboratories, classrooms, and bedrooms. Meaning emerges not from the machinery, but from the minds engaged with its output. A researcher might stare at a glowing pixel cluster on a monitor and feel the thrill of uncovering something ancient. Someone else might encounter an image online and feel a quiet shift in perspective. A third person, lying in bed with insomnia humming softly beside them, might find comfort in knowing that even in their stillness, a telescope across the void is keeping watch. Webb's neutrality also emphasizes the humility required in cosmic exploration. It captures data without presuming to know the larger picture, reminding us that understanding is always provisional. The telescope is a witness, not an advocate. It does not seek to confirm what we hope is true, nor to dismantle what we fear is wrong. It allows the universe to speak for itself, and in doing so, it teaches us to listen more carefully, not only to the cosmos, but to our own interpretations. Occasionally, scientists jest about how Webb appears to have no opinion on the surprises it reveals. A galaxy brighter than expected? Webb registers its photons without so much as a flicker of surprise. A structure appearing earlier than models predicted? The telescope quietly logs the data. If the universe presented a paradox wrapped in riddles, Webb would still respond with the same patient, unwavering focus. Humans may react with raised eyebrows, recalculations, or coffee-fueled discussions, but Webb simply continues its steady accumulation of light. Its role, then, is an invitation. It asks us, not with words but with its silence, to approach the cosmos with similar openness, to see what is there rather than what we expect, to allow meaning to take the shape it naturally forms, to acknowledge that understanding can unfold gently, without certainty arriving all at once. Just as someone lying awake might notice the faint hum of a refrigerator or the soft rustle of air against the walls, Webb notices the faintest signals drifting across eternity. Those signals hold no inherent judgment. They are simply evidence of existence. And in receiving them, the telescope provides humanity with raw material for wonder. In this chapter of cosmic listening, Webb acts as the universe's patient ear, unbiased, unhurried, unfaltering. It neither interprets nor concludes. It simply allows the cosmos to speak, knowing that humans will supply the meaning when the time is right, perhaps while gazing at a ceiling and letting the night remind them how vast and gentle the unknown can be. Chapter 13. A universe that started earlier than we felt ready for this chapter carries a soft philosophical weight. If the universe began forming complexity sooner than expected, what does that say about readiness, planning, and control? The reflection remains gentle, never demanding answers, only offering the thought like a smooth stone placed nearby. There is a quiet pause that happens whenever we learn that something began earlier than we anticipated. It's the same moment of stillness one feels upon discovering a plant sprouting through soil that was thought too cold, or finding a child already awake and dressed before the alarm has rung. A mix of surprise, admiration, and a hint of introspection settles in. The universe, it seems, has been practicing this art for billions of years, starting things before we imagined conditions to be ready, beginning intricate processes long before any observer exists to take notice. Webb's discoveries reveal a cosmos that appears to have stepped into complexity sooner than our predictions suggested. Structures arose with quiet efficiency. Stars ignited with assured purpose. Galaxies formed with an unexpected fluency. And while the scientific implications ripple outward in equations and models, there is also something gently philosophical drifting among the findings. It invites us to wonder, not intensely but softly, about what readiness truly means in a universe that does not wait for permission. In human experience, readiness is often treated as a prerequisite for action. We prepare, plan, rehearse, and evaluate. We consult calendars and guidelines. But the cosmos operates with a looser sense of timing. There is no committee overseeing the formation of the first stars, no checklist ensuring that gas clouds feel mentally prepared before collapsing into luminous spheres. Processes unfold simply because the conditions allow them to, not because a consensus was reached. The early universe models suggested a long stretch of simplicity before anything intricate emerged. Yet the evidence hints otherwise. Complexity appears to have seeped in earlier, like dawn light filtering beneath a door before anyone expects morning to arrive. This misalignment between expectation and reality carries a small, reflective charm, as if the universe were gently reminding us that beginnings do not always wait for ideal circumstances. Sometimes they merely begin. When one contemplates this, a quiet shift in perspective occurs. Perhaps readiness is less about timing and more about acceptance, the willingness to move forward even when conditions appear incomplete by our standards. The cosmos, in its vast and indifferent patience, never stops to question whether it is ready to evolve. It unfolds because unfolding is what the universe does. And in this effortless progression lies a subtle lesson about the difference between preparation and emergence. Of course, the universe does not think in metaphors, and it certainly does not contemplate its own choices. Yet its behavior reflects patterns that echo across scales. Stars form while their environments are still turbulent. Galaxies take shape amid swirling chaos. Large structures knit themselves together even as space stretches and reshapes the fabric around them. Nothing waits for perfect stability. There is no moment when the universe pauses to ask, "Is now the right time?" And somehow, despite the lack of planning, everything aligns into a coherent whole. This realization can be unexpectedly comforting. It suggests that the cosmos thrives not by controlling conditions, but by responding to them. Perhaps readiness is less a state of being and more a natural outcome of participating in the flow of events. When circumstances allow movement, the universe moves. When they allow formation, the universe forms. There is no rush, but there is also no hesitation. One might picture these early cosmic developments with the faintest touch of humor. Galaxies appearing early to the cosmic gathering, stars lighting up while the background is still setting itself, structures forming before anyone has officially announced that it is time. And yet, everything proceeds smoothly. The universe seems entirely untroubled by its own lack of ceremony. Humans, by contrast, often look for signals. We wait for signs, confirmations, and assurances before calling something a beginning. But the universe gently undermines this instinct. It shows us that significant developments can unfold quietly, almost shyly, without trumpets or countdowns. Complexity can arise from conditions that appear sparse. Progress can occur even when the environment still feels unpolished. There is also the soft implication that our discomfort at early cosmic activity is simply a matter of perspective. From our vantage point, the timelines feel surprising. But to the universe, no moment is early or late. There is only the steady rhythm of physics expressing itself. The cosmos has no expectation of how long anything should take. It only responds to what is possible. Reflecting on this does not demand conclusions. It is more like holding a smooth stone found on a quiet walk. Cool, simple, pleasant to touch, yet somehow containing a whisper of deeper meaning. The universe, beginning earlier than we felt ready for, invites us to relax our grip on certainty, to acknowledge that beginnings can be natural rather than orchestrated, unhurried, yet decisive. Perhaps, in the vast cosmic sense, readiness is not something we achieve, but something we recognize in hindsight. The early cosmos did not wait to feel prepared before forming stars. It simply became what it was capable of becoming, and in its gentle unfolding, it leaves us with a thought worth keeping close. Sometimes, beginnings do not ask our permission. They happen quietly, confidently, and long before we think the moment has arrived. Chapter 14. Standing somewhere new without moving here, the listener is reminded that Earth hasn't shifted, and neither have we. And yet, our mental position in the universe has quietly changed. The beginning is farther away now. Or perhaps we were always standing closer to the middle than we thought. It is a curious sensation to discover that one's place in the universe has changed, even though one's feet, and indeed the entire planet beneath them, haven't moved at all. Earth continues its familiar routines, rotating with dependable rhythm, circling the sun with steady patience, tracing a path through space that feels almost ceremonial in its repetition. Yet, in the stillness of these motions, our understanding of where we stand has shifted. Not physically, but in a way that touches the mind with a gentle, widening awareness. Webb's deep glimpses into the past have nudged the cosmic horizon farther away. What once felt like the outermost edge of the universe now reveals itself as merely another layer, another boundary that dissolves the moment we approach it. The beginning, long imagined as a distant landmark, keeps stepping backward like the soft tide retreating from the shore. It is not being lost. It is being redefined. This subtle adjustment in perspective leaves us standing somewhere new, though our bodies remain as rooted as ever. It is a change similar to learning that a familiar map extends beyond the fold you once thought was its border. Nothing in your surroundings shifts, yet the landscape grows in your mind, and with it, the sense of your own location expands. You have not been moved, but the world around you has quietly grown more vast. There is something deeply humbling in this. Humanity has long charted its cosmic coordinates through stories, measurements, and models. Sometimes we have placed ourselves at the center, sometimes at the edge, and sometimes in between. But with each new layer of understanding, we find that the universe offers a more intricate geometry than any single position can easily capture. What Webb reveals is not merely a greater distance to the beginning, but a new sense of depth in every direction. It is as though the universe has pulled back a curtain not to show us something closer, but something farther. A gesture that both expands the stage and softens our certainty about where the drama began. The result is a strange and gentle adjustment, a kind of mental floating. We remain anchored to Earth, yet our perception drifts outward, balancing between awe and calm curiosity. This drifting invites reflection on what it means to be at the beginning of anything. We often imagine starts as fixed points, corners to turn, markers to step over. But cosmology suggests something quieter, that beginnings can slide gracefully along the timeline as our understanding deepens. The universe does not mark its chapters with bold lines. It leaves them faint, inviting revision as new light arrives. In this way, the beginning becomes a movable horizon, and our position relative to it becomes part of an ongoing conversation. And so we find ourselves in a peculiar philosophical posture. We are farther from the beginning, yet more connected to it than before. The increased distance does not push us away, but rather draws us into a deeper awareness of the journey light has taken to reach us. Every ancient photon Webb receives traveled across an expanding universe, threading its way through epochs that stretch behind us so far they blur into abstraction. We have not moved, but the path reaching toward us has grown longer, more intricate, more layered. This creates a gentle irony. In learning that the beginning lies farther beyond our perception, we also learn that our place in the cosmic timeline is not as peripheral as once assumed. If the earliest structures formed sooner than expected, then the distance between us and those first luminous processes is both greater and, strangely, less isolating. It suggests that the universe matured quickly, that complexity set in early, and that the vast gulf of time behind us is richer than the simple darkness we once imagined. In this way, the universe seems to nudge us toward the notion that we are not standing at the edge of a grand story, nor at its center, but somewhere comfortably in the unfolding middle. Not the beginning of beginnings, not the end of ends, but a warm point in a continuum of growth. Much like standing in a forest, surrounded by trees older than your memory and saplings just beginning their climb, the sense of place becomes relational rather than absolute. The idea that our position has changed without our having moved carries a quiet humor. It is reminiscent of discovering that a room is larger than you thought because someone has opened a hidden door. You remain where you are, yet you suddenly understand that the space around you extends farther, with hallways and rooms you had never noticed. The universe, it appears, has such doors, and Webb has begun to open them one by one. This expanded sense of place does not demand urgency or comprehension. It simply invites awareness. It encourages a slower contemplation of the vast structures, early lights, and shifting beginnings revealed by Webb's careful listening. With each new discovery, we are gently repositioned, not in coordinates or kilometers, but in understanding. Perhaps this is the quiet secret of cosmic exploration, that the more we learn about the universe, the more we learn about our own tendency to draw boundaries where none exist. The beginning has moved not to elude us, but to remind us that our mental maps are always temporary sketches. And in this light, standing somewhere new without moving becomes less a contradiction and more a natural part of discovering a cosmos that is always larger, older, and more intricate than we first believed. Here, resting in the soft awareness of shifting horizons, we find a new kind of stillness, a recognition that the universe does not need us to move in order to change our sense of where we are. Chapter 15, Letting the Universe Begin. Again, slowly, the final chapter decelerates fully. No new discoveries are introduced. Instead, the narration rests on the idea that the universe doesn't start once. It begins continuously, in gas clouds and stars, and understanding, the story gently fades into cosmic cycles, darkness, expansion, and rest, leaving the listener suspended in a beginning that never fully ends. There is a kind of comfort in imagining the universe as something that began once, cleanly, decisively, like a book with a single title page. But as our understanding deepens, a softer picture emerges, one in which beginnings unfold not all at once, but again and again, on scales both vast and intimate. The universe does not wait for ceremonial moments to begin. It simply continues beginning, in ways so gentle and continuous that we often mistake them for something else. If we step back from any one moment, whether it is the formation of a star, the collapse of a cloud of gas, or a sudden insight about cosmic history, we begin to notice a rhythm, not a rhythm with beats or measures, but one more like the rising and falling of a great, slow tide. Matter gathers, drifts apart, and gathers again. Stars ignite, fade, and leave behind material from which new stars emerge. Galaxies grow, merge, and reshape themselves. Even light itself, stretched across endless distances, carries the imprint of beginnings that ripple outward long after their source has changed. In this rhythm, there is no single point that declares, here is where the universe truly starts. Instead, beginnings nest within one another. A star's birth is woven into the life and death of earlier stars, whose remnants made its formation possible. A galaxy's structure echoes ancient patterns of matter laid out before any star existed. And our own understanding, our attempt to place ourselves within this vast unfolding, begins and begins again, each time we learn to see a bit farther or listen a bit more closely. It is tempting to imagine that beginnings must be accompanied by some sense of readiness or culmination. Yet, as we drift through this final chapter, we can allow ourselves to let go of such expectations. The universe teaches a quieter lesson. Beginnings often happen without announcement, without fanfare, and without perfect preparation. A cloud of gas does not wait for ideal symmetry before collapsing into a star. A planet does not wait for applause before coalescing out of dust. Even life on Earth, our most familiar beginning of all, emerged gradually, unhurried by any need for ceremony. To rest in this idea is to settle into a gentler relationship with time. We can imagine the early universe not as a place racing toward complexity, but as a place drifting toward it, slowly, naturally, as though carried by a current deeper than intention. And as we follow this current forward, we find that the present moment is part of the same unfolding. We, too, are shaped by beginnings that stretch back beyond memory, beyond visibility, into eras we can only approach through the faintest traces left in ancient light. The night sky is filled with reminders of these continuous origins. Each star, however familiar, represents a process that took shape long before its first glimmer reached us. Each galaxy embodies countless cycles of birth and dissolution. Even the dark spaces between them, those quiet expanses where nothing seems to announce itself, hold the potential for future beginnings, slow and patient, waiting for conditions to align. There is a soft humility in recognizing that the universe does not require clear boundaries to progress. A beginning can be as subtle as a temperature shift in a drifting cloud, as quiet as gravity gathering matter grain by grain, as understated as a photon setting out on a journey it will never see completed. These origins are not separate events, but overlapping stories, each reaching out to the next with the gentleness of a hand extended in passing. Allowing the universe to begin again, slowly, is also an invitation to allow ourselves the same patience. We often seek clarity, definition, and completion, but cosmic history suggests that much of what exists began tentatively, without certainty, and grew into clarity only with time. There is reassurance in this, that our own understanding, like the universe itself, is allowed to unfold without rushing. That our place in this story does not hinge on knowing its exact starting point, but on appreciating the continuity that connects every moment to the ones before. If we imagine the cosmos as a vast breathing entity, then beginnings are its inhalations, deep, gradual, and dispersed across every corner of existence. Its exhalations are the moments when structures settle, stars rest, and galaxies hold their quiet shapes. And somewhere in these alternating motions, we find a stillness that feels both ancient and immediate. As the chapter slows into its final cadence, the universe becomes less a sequence of events and more a landscape of ongoing renewal. Darkness is no longer an ending, but a cradle. Light is no longer a revelation, but a continuation. Expansion is not a departure, but a widening space in which new stories will one day anchor themselves. There is no urgency in this view, no pressure to resolve the cosmos into a simple arc. Just a gentle recognition that beginnings flow through everything, endlessly. You may picture yourself here floating in the quiet between stars, suspended in a moment where the universe feels both fully formed and perpetually forming. Nothing concludes. Nothing insists. Instead, the story settles into a long, soft breath, a reminder that the cosmos does not start once and for all, but always and forever, in ways as calm and unhurried as the night itself. And so the universe begins again, slowly, continually, almost imperceptibly, and we, without moving, drift with it.